Parshas Noach, Tovshin Pei Gimel. Let's be honest, when it comes to these parshias, for some reason everybody's ears perk up and you have these amazing, if we could call it stories, quote stories in the Torah. We begin with Noach this week, we move on next week to Avram Avinu, then we go to Yitzchak Avinu, Yaakov Avinu, the Shvatim. Very, very exciting, and so much to learn from each parsha. And the Mefarshim tell us that anything that's written at the beginning of the Torah, there's a reason for everything. And if something is written at the beginning of the Torah, then it carries extra special weight in the lessons that it teaches us. And the lessons that we need to learn from it are that much greater if it's at the beginning of the Torah. And the Mabul, and what we read about in this week's Parsha, and everything that surrounded the Mabul, everything that led up to the Mabul, everything that happened during the Mabul, and how it all played out, the Mabul and everything that came along with it must be teaching us a lot, because we see that it was written at the beginning of the Torah. And you're going to tell me, well, that's because it happened in that order. But we've mentioned in the past, and you know that the Mabul was already pretty far into history, and really a lot of things happened. In the interim, things happened in those 16, 17, 1800 years during this period, but only certain things Torah chose to write about. In the Mabul, the Torah writes about at length. So it must be that it's not just a history lesson or a very captivating story. There's more to be learned. And most of us, many of us, have the same picture of the Mabul and the lessons around it that we had when we were in first grade. And think, if you don't learn the Chazal and the Midrashim and Rashi and the things that actually dig a little bit deeper into what happened here, then we remain with the same naive picture of what the Mabul was all about. And the Nesivos Shalom tells us that we need to understand that the Mabul was not really in the realm of a punishment. It wasn't just that people had done bad and now they were being punished. The Nesivos Shalom tells us that the corruption of that generation, the corruption leading up to that, was so thorough and so tangible that the world, it was a metzias. It was a metzias of a thing that the world could simply not exist anymore. It wasn't just a punishment for things that were done. The fact was that the corruption was so deep that the world would actually had to fall apart. The world had to go. But we need to understand that along with all the lessons that the Torah teaches us about why the Mabul came about, and what the corruption was about, and what the negative influences, what took place during that generation, what got us into trouble, that's not the only lesson to be learned here. The Torah is also teaching us how one can protect themselves by the fact that Noach was protected during the Mabul. The Torah is teaching us how one protects themselves and avoids the calamities and the problems that hit the Dor HaMabul. And really, essentially, in a nutshell, what that was, the lesson that we want to focus on this week in our shir, is the lesson of the Tevas Noach. Noach built an ark, and we know Noach was the one who did what Hashem wanted, right? Especially during this year, everybody knows Noach was a big tzaddik, right? And everybody understands that Noach was the one who followed the command of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to spend all those years building a teva. And the Tevas Noach was not just there to save the people and the animals from the Mabul outside, the Nesivos Noach has a much deeper meaning. And what the Nesivos Shalom tells us that we need to learn from the Teva of Noach is that every person, in whatever generation they live, and especially in our generation, when we live right now, every person, there's a Teva for every individual. And it really, even today, there's a corner, there's a shelter, there's a place where you have to know to go to shelter yourself from the spiritual storms that are out there. And you know, we live today in a generation where more than ever it really applies to every one of us, and that whatever went on for the hundreds of thousands of years since the Mabul, as time progresses, as time goes on, the storms out there and the influences out there get a lot worse and get a lot tougher. And we need to understand this ideal and this idea of a Nesivos Noach, of every person having a place where they can run for shelter, to shelter yourself from what's going on out there. And listen, one thing that we've spoken about in the past, and we've spoken many times about, not just in Parshas Noach, one shelter is, of course, the Shabbos Kodesh, that every person knows that Shabbos, coming up tomorrow night, right? Shabbos protects any and every Jew from even the most troubled situations. Shabbos is a Nesivos Noach, a protection from the world out there, a protection from the Mabul. As we say, Shabbos Kodesh, Nafshois Yisrael, B'tzel Kenofecha Yechesoyun. Shabbos is a shelter. Shabbos is a place to run. Shabbos is a place that every Yid can hide and cover themselves up and be sheltered, to live in a spiritual world, to block out everything that's going on outside. Shabbos is the source of all Dveikus B'Hashem, where a Jew can lift themselves up and out, even if somebody has done serious averos, like the Dora Mabul. The Chazal tell us that if a person, even if a person did serious averos, Dora Mabul, Kedor Enosh, the Gemara talks about, you have to know that Shabbos Kodesh is a shelter. If a person keeps Shabbos and does Shabbos right, he has mechila on even the most serious things. And that's Shabbos. That's one place that represents sort of for every person like a Nesivos Noach, a place where you can hide away, where you can reconnect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Torah, that is through the Shabbos. And before we discuss the next idea of a Teva in our generation, I just wanted to mention something that I thought about when I was learning through this piece of Nesivos Shalom this week. And I thought about something, and let me know if you think that it's a good point and an observation. That, like I mentioned, we look outside today and you see what's going on, where everything goes, and the more crazy you can get, the more insanity, the more corrupt you are, the more you're held in high esteem today in the secular world. And it's going on everywhere and all around us in our world. And really, what every person needs to know is that every person can say to themselves, in whatever way you speak to yourself, whether you go and you actually talk to yourself, you go where you're alone in your room, you get in your car, you go somewhere where people don't think you're crazy if you talk to yourself, but every person can tell themselves that I'm not part of this. What's going on out there, and you don't need to do what every popular, conventional, corrupt culture thing out there is telling you to do, what the latest designer and the latest ideas and the latest newspaper article. Every person can say, no, that's not for me. I'm going into my Teva just because everyone in the world is doing something or saying something or acting in a certain way. You don't need to follow every misguided trend that enters our society. And that's an idea that I was thinking what a Nesivos Noach is. That every person, the Torah is telling us that every person could make a box or shelter around themselves and say, no, that's not for me. I'm not part of that world. I'm closing off the storm that's out there. Hashem wants you to build your teva. Your teva is different than anyone else's because you have your capacity, you have your capabilities, and you have your koyach that you're able to use to shelter yourself, and everybody knows what they have to shelter themselves from and how much strength you have to keep it out. So we spoke about Shabbos as a way. The Nesivos Shalom tells us that the Torah too, the Torah also is a shmira for everyone, for every person. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Chazal tell us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the Yetzer Hara, and he directly connected that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the Torah as an antidote to the Yetzer Hara. And the more Torah you learn, the more you're involved in the Torah, the more you live with the ideals of the Torah, the easier time, or not necessarily easier, but the more ammunition you have to fight the Yetzer Hara. The Torah protects you. It protects your dignity and what you stand for. And if a person, Nesivos Shalom says you could do one connected the other. If a person did an Aveira with energy, so what do you do now? You sit down and you learn. You sit down and you learn something with cheshek, with that same energy, and you show HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I don't use my energy just to do things that might not be right. I use my energy, I have that same energy to learn Torah. And whatever stage of life you're in, every stage of life comes with its own unique Yetzer Hara. Don't think that a person gets older. People, as you get older, you have different Yetzer Hara, different desires, different things that you want, different things that you expect. And what we're saying over here is that at every stage in your life, there's a constant. That Kadosh Baruch Hu created the Yetzer Hara, and He created the Torah to be used at any point and any stage of your life. That is your teva. That is your shelter to go away. That's why the Chazal tell us that if a person feels the Yetzer Hara, moshcheu lebeis hamedrash, take him into the Beis HaMedrash, because that's what kills the Yetzer Hara. A good shtickle Torah, sitting down, learning a few minutes, sitting down and learning, that is the answer to the Yetzer Hara. That is your teva. And just because, quote, everyone else in the world is doing something, they're doing this or they're saying that, and they're saying that this is okay today. It wasn't okay for hundreds of thousands of years, and today we're saying that it's okay and it's mutter and this and that. Who are you listening to? Yeah, we have to listen to our Talmidei Chachamim, to our Gedolim, to our Torah. That's the guiding force. That is our teva, and that's what's going to save every person from Chas v'Shalom falling deeper into anything. Where you stay, and you stay in your teva, and if you stay in your teva, then you come out on top. And it's really the same as it was for Noach. Noach built this teva, and that was a shelter. There was so much going on. The rest of the world was dying. The water was impossible to survive in. And the water rose above the highest mountains, and everything else in the world was gone. But Noach was in that teva, and he was safe. And that's really the lesson I want to bring out of this week's parsha, that it's not just history. Every person can turn to themselves and say, no, I don't have to be part of this. I build my own cocoon. I have my own place. I have my own teva, which will save me from what is going on in the craziness of the world. And let's hope that everybody thinks of this lesson, learns this lesson. We come to Shabbos Kodesh. Tomorrow night we have Shabbos. We could learn Torah, and we could think of this idea that every single one of us, every one of us, has the capability and the koyach to build a teva and preserve your own life of ruchnius.